The tiny creature he saved transformed into a gorgeous alien woman. A goddamn nightmare at the best of times. Today wasn't the best of times, Henry. Thorn wiped sweat from his brow as he navigated through the bustling alien marketplace, his muscular frame drawing. Occasional glances from the various species that called this interstellar trading hub home his light brown hair. Slightly wavy and casually styled, stuck to his forehead in the humid atmosphere, the synthetic leather-like material of. His black pants clung uncomfortably to his legs, and he'd long since abandoned his shirt in the sweltering heat, leaving his well-defined torso bare except for the utility belt slung across his chest. 50 credits for this piece of junk, you're out of your mind, Henry growled at the Vexillian merchant adjusting his black fingerless gloves as he examined the faulty power converter. I could get 3 working ones on Centauri for that. Price, the merchant's 4 narrowed, then go to Centauri human, no one's keeping. You hear. Henry was about to fire back a colorful response when a commotion erupted nearby. A sleek hover cart, piloted by what appeared to be a drunk draconian, careened wildly through the market. Aliens of all shapes and sizes scattered, desperate to avoid being flattened. That's when he saw it, a small, blue-furred creature darting between stalls directly in the path of the oncoming vertical. Without thinking, Henry lunged forward, diving across the dusty thoroughfare, his hand encased in the fingerless glove closed around something soft and warm just as the hover cart whooshed past, missing them both by inches. Rolling to his feet with practiced ease, Henry found himself holding a trembling ball of bright blue fur. 2 large, intelligent yellow eyes with black pupils stared up at him from what resembled a terrestrial kitten, if kittens were electric blue, and had 6 tiny legs. Easy there, little one, he murmured, surprised by how light the creature felt in his hands. That was a close call. The creature made no sound, but continued to stare at him with those unnerving yellow eyes. There was something in that gaze, something that made the hairs on the back of Henry's neck stand up. It wasn't fear or gratitude he saw reflected there, it was understanding, intelligence. You're not just some stray, are you?" he whispered. The creature blinked slowly, then glanced around nervously, as if checking whether they were being watched. Henry followed its gaze and noticed a group of Raphael-looking aliens at the edge of the marketplace. They were scanning the crowd with what appeared to be tracking devices, one of them a particularly nasty-looking Krell, with cybernetic enhancements pointed in their general direction. "Friends of yours?" Henry asked the creature, which responded by burrowing deeper into his arms. "Take that as a no." Making a split-second decision that he'd probably regret, Henry tucked the blue ball of fur into the small pack at his side and casually strolled away from the marketplace, light stubble framing his determined expression as his blue eyes scanned for the quickest exit. His rented quarters were in the seedier part of the spaceport, a small, dingy room that smelled of alien spices and engine grease. Once inside, he carefully placed the creature on his unmade bed. "All right. What the hell are you?" he asked, not expecting an answer. The creature sat perfectly still, those yellow eyes never leaving his face. "You understand me, don't you?" Henry ran a hand through his wavy hair. "This is crazy. I'm talking to what amounts to a blue space cat." The creature tilted its head, then made a series of gestures with its front paws pointing at its throat, and then making a cutting motion. "You can't speak," Henry guessed. The creature nodded vigorously. "Well, me sideways," Henry muttered. "Either I've finally lost it, or you're a lot more than you appear to be." The creature nodded again, more emphatically this time. Henry paced the small room, weighing his options. "I know a guy who deals in black market tech. If you're what I think you are, a translation module might help, but it'll cost me." The creature's eyes seemed to brighten at this suggestion. "Fine," Henry sighed, reaching for his jacket, "but you're staying here. I don't need those goons spotting you again." He placed a bowl of water on the floor and pointed sternly at the bed. "Stay, I'll be back in an hour. Try not to destroy anything." As he closed the door behind him, Henry couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken a turn for the complicated, and in his experience, complicated usually meant dangerous. The black market on Nexus Prime operated in plain sight, hidden only by the willful ignorance of corrupt officials. Henry found Dex's Tyrellian contact in the usual spot, a dimly lit stall wedged between a food vendor and a dealer in questionable pharmaceuticals. Translation: Tech. Dex's antenna twitched with Interest what language I don't know. Henry admitted something universal dexes. Compound eyes narrowed universal translators are heavily regulated. What? Are you mixed up in Thorn? Nothing illegal. Henry lied smoothly, just picked up a pet that I think might be smarter. Then it looks a pet dex, repeated clearly not believing him. That'll be 500 credits. And I never saw you. Henry winced at the price but handed over his credit chip. 5 minutes later he was hurrying back to his quarters with a small, innocuous-looking device tucked securely in his pocket. The blue creature was exactly where he'd left it, perched on the edge of his bed, those yellow eyes fixed on the door as if it had been counting the seconds until his return. Got it, Henry announced, holding up the translator. This better be worth it. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle the creature. This goes around your neck. It might feel strange at first, but it shouldn't hurt. The creature remained perfectly still as Henry carefully fitted the small device around what passed for its neck, adjusting it to sit comfortably against the blue fur. Now, let's see if this works. He activated the device with a small remote. A soft hum filled the room as the translator calibrated itself. For a moment nothing happened, then a soft, distinctly female voice emerged from the device. Thank you. You have no idea how long I've been waiting for someone to help me. Henry nearly fell off the bed in surprise. Holy, it worked. Yes, the creature replied, those yellow eyes now seeming to hold a hint of amusement. And I have quite a story to tell you. Henry Thorn, how do you know my name? I heard the merchant call you by it. My hearing is quite acute in this form. The creature stood up on its 6 little legs and performed what looked like a small bow. My name is Lou, and I am not what I appear to be. No kidding, Henry said dryly. So what exactly are you, Lou, and why were those thugs after you? The creature Lou settled back down on the bed, her posture somehow conveying both vulnerability and dignity despite her diminutive form. I am from the planet Ares, or at least I was. Her voice, though mechanically produced by the translator, carried a weight of sadness. This form is not my true one. I was transformed. Henry repeated incredulously. How is that even possible? By a man named Drexelvorn, a wealthy trader with access to forbidden technology. He did this to me as punishment when I tried to escape him. The blue fur along Louis's back bristled slightly. I was his property. Henry felt a surge of anger at the implication. Slavery is illegal in most of the galaxy, not if you're powerful enough to ignore the laws. Louisa replied bitterly, and Vaughn is very powerful. Those men you saw were his. They have been hunting me since I escaped 3 cycles ago. Henry leaned back against the wall, processing this information. So you're actually a humanoid, an Alaran woman trapped in the body of a whatever. This is a Nexian ferox, yes, a harmless pet species native to this planet. Louis's yellow eyes seemed to dim slightly. A convenient disguise, but also a prison. I cannot speak without this translator. I cannot defend myself. I cannot even open a door without help. And I'm guessing you want me to help you get your body back? Henry asked, already knowing the answer. Yes, the simple word hung in the air between them, but it will be dangerous. Vor will not give up what he considers his property easily, and the transformation technology is heavily guarded. Henry ran a hand over his stubble jaw, considering he was supposed to be leaving Nexus Prime tomorrow, heading back to the human colonies with a shipment of medical supplies. Getting involved in this mess would mean delaying that trip, possibly losing the contract altogether. But looking at the small creature before him, at Louisa, he found he couldn't just walk away. All right, he said finally, I'll help you, but we're going to need a plan and probably weapons, lots of weapons for the first time. Louisa's posture relaxed slightly. Thank you, Henry, I promise if we succeed, you will be well compensated. Let's worry about keeping us both alive first, Henry replied, already mentally cataloging the contacts he could call on for help. For now you should rest. Tomorrow we start figuring out how to get your body back. As Louisa curled up on a corner of his pillow, those intelligent yellow eyes slowly closing, Henry wondered what the hell he got himself into, and more importantly, what Louisa actually looked like in her true form. He had a feeling he was about to find out one way or another. Morning light filtered through the grimy viewport of Henry's rented quarters, casting mottled patterns across the floor. He'd slept poorly, his mind racing with thoughts of Vorn transformation technology and the strange creature Woman now curled up at the foot of his bed. Louisa stirred as Henry sat up her. Bright yellow eyes blinking open. Good morning, came the soft mechanical voice from her translator. Morning, Henry replied, running a hand through his tousled hair. I've been thinking about our situation, and Louisa uncurled herself, stretching her 6 little legs in a way that was oddly graceful. You mentioned compensation last night. What exactly did you mean by that? He swung his legs over the side of the bed, reaching for a canteen of water. Louisa's blue fur seemed to shimmer slightly in the morning light. I have access to accounts Vor doesn't know about, credits, information, resources that could be valuable to someone like you. That's not what I'm asking. Henry took a long drink. I need to know what you know about Vaughn's security, his compound, the transformation tech, if I'm going to risk my neck. I need details. Louis's posture straightened, somehow conveying dignity. Despite her diminutive form, the transformation device is kept in his private laboratory. I've seen it. A cylindrical chamber with control panels that only Vaughn can access. And where's this lab located? In the heart of his estate on the outskirts of the city. It's heavily guarded, but she hesitated. I know a way in. Henry raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Vaughn collects rare specimens. Beings he's transformed. He occasionally hosts private viewings for potential buyers. Louis's voice grew quieter. If you posed as a wealthy collector interested in his merchandise, you could gain access. You want me to pretend I'm in the market for transformed beings? Henry frowned. That's pretty damn risky. It's our best chance. Once inside, I can guide you to the laboratory. Louisa moved closer to him on the bed. I memorized the security protocols, the guard rotations, everything. I was planning my escape for months before I managed it. Henry studied the small blue creature, trying to imagine the woman trapped inside. What do you actually look like? Louisa, your real form. I mean, if a blue-furred alien creature could blush, Henry would swear Louisa did. Just that my people are not dissimilar to humans in basic structure. 2 arms. 2 legs. We're slightly taller on average, with more delicate features. Our skin has a faint luminescence to it, especially in darkness. Hair, eyes. Henry found himself strangely curious. Silver white hair is common among my kind. My eyes are the same yellow you see now that didn't change with the transformation. There was a wistful quality to her mechanically translated voice. I was considered attractive by the standards of both our species. It's why Vaughn. She trailed off. An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Henry felt a surge of protectiveness, followed by something else, a curiosity about Laia that went beyond their current predicament. Well, he said, finally standing up and stretching his muscular frame, if I'm going to pose as a wealthy collector, I'll need appropriate attire and credentials that'll stand up to scrutiny. I can help with that, Louis offered. Bourne's security is thorough, but not infallible. I know what information they check. Henry nodded, pulling on a clean shirt that did little to hide his well-defined physique. We'll need to establish a cover story. How I heard about his collection, what I'm specifically interested in. You could say you're interested in acquiring a companion. Louisa suggested, her yellow eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made Henry pause. That's what I was intended to be. The implication hung in the air between them. Henry felt a flicker of anger at what Louisa must have endured, followed by something more complicated, a strange attraction to this being he'd only just met, whose true form he'd never even seen. I'm sorry for what happened to you, he said quietly. No one deserves to be treated as property. On my world, partnerships between species aren't uncommon, Louisa continued, her voice taking on a different tone. We believe compatibility goes beyond physical form. Henry found himself staring at the small blue creature, trying to reconcile the feminine voice in intelligence with the alien appearance. That's a progressive. Is it so different for humans? Luja asked, moving closer to him on the bed. Don't you form connections based on more than appearance? Sometimes, Henry admitted, feeling oddly flustered, but physical attraction usually comes first for us. And you can't be physically attracted to someone you haven't seen. There was a teasing quality to her voice now. Henry laughed, unsurprised by the direction of their conversation. I didn't say that, I just meant, well, it's complicated. I find you physically attractive, Henry Thorne. Louisa stated matter-of-factly, even in my current state, I can appreciate your form. Your species has an interesting musculature. Henry felt heat rise to his Face was he being flirted with by a blue space cat, and more disturbingly was he enjoying it. Thanks, I think, he replied awkwardly. Let's focus on getting you back to your real form before we discuss musculature. Of course, was that amusement in her voice, but when I am restored I hope you'll find me as intriguing as I find you. The comment sent an unexpected jolt through Henry. He cleared his throat, turning to gather his equipment to hide his reaction. We should start preparations. If we're going to infiltrate Vorn's compound, we'll need more than just fancy clothes and a cover story. Agreed. Louisa jumped gracefully from the bed to the small table near the viewport. I suggest we begin by establishing your new identity. You'll need a nick that sounds wealthy and important. As they began planning, Henry couldn't help but wonder what Leah would look like in her true form. The thought of her restored, tall, luminescent skin, silver white hair, those striking yellow eyes, and a humanoid face created a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. He told himself it was just curiosity, maybe mixed with the satisfaction of helping someone in need, but deep down he knew it was something more, a connection forming that transcended Louisa's current appearance, and based on her comments she felt it too. Henry, Louisa's voice broke through his thoughts. Are you listening? I was explaining about Vaughn's security scanners. Sorry, he said, refocusing, just thinking about what we're up against. But as they continued planning their dangerous infiltration, Henry found his thoughts repeatedly drifting to what might happen after they succeeded, if they succeeded, and for the first time since rescuing the small blue creature from certain death, he found himself hopping for more than just completing a mission and collecting payment. He wanted to meet the real Louisa. 3 days of intensive preparation had transformed Henry from a rough-edged cargo hauler into Lord Henry Thorne, a wealthy collector from the human colonies of Proxima Centauri. His new wardrobe, purchased with credits from one of Louisa's hidden accounts, consisted of tailored garments that emphasized his muscular physique while projecting an air of refined affluence. How do I look? He asked, adjusting the high collar of his midnight blue jacket. Louisa, perched on the room's small desk, tilted her head appreciatively, like someone who could afford to buy whatever he wanted. That's the idea. Henry checked his reflection in the tarnished mirror. The stubble he normally wore had been trimmed to a precise, fashionable shadow. His wavy brown hair was styled with expensive product. Even his posture had changed, shoulders back, chin slightly raised, exuding the casual arrogance of the privileged class. The invitation arrived while you were out, Louisa said, indicating a holographic card on the desk. Bourne's showing is tomorrow evening. Henry picked up the invitation, studying the elegant script that materialized above it. Private viewing of unique biological specimens. He read aloud, by invitation only, sounds exclusive. It is Vaughn only deals with the wealthiest collectors. Lewa's voice from the translator carried a hint of tension. There's something else, news from my contacts. Henry looked up sharply. What is it? Vaughn has implemented a new security measure, a scanner specifically designed to detect transformed beings. The blue fur along Louisa's spine bristled slightly. It can identify the unique energy signature left by the transformation process. Henry set the invitation down. That complicates things indeed. If I enter his compound, the scanners will immediately alert security. Leia's yellow eyes fixed on him intently. You'll have to go alone. Henry frowned. That wasn't the plan. I need you to guide me through the compound. We have no choice. Louisa jumped gracefully from the desk to the bed where Henry sat. But there might be a way for me to help remotely, she explained, that possessed a limited form of telepathic connection. Not mind reading, but a sharing of sensory information that could be established through physical contact. If we form this connection before you leave, I'll be able to see what you see, hear what you hear, she said. I can guide you through the compound that way. Telepathy? Henry raised an eyebrow. You didn't mention that ability before. It's not something we share with outsiders, Louisa admitted, and it requires intimacy, a deep connection. The word hung in the between them. Henry felt a strange flutter in his chest. What kind of intimacy are we talking about? He asked, his voice lower than he intended. Louisa moved closer to him on the bed. Physical proximity is essential, but it's more than that. There needs to be trust, openness. Her mechanical voice somehow conveyed a softness that made Henry's pulse quicken, a willingness to be vulnerable. And how do we establish This connection, Henry asked, suddenly aware of how close the small blue creature was to him among my people. It's done through a ritual that involves physical contact and shared breath, Louis explained. It's difficult to describe. But I believe it can work between our species. Henry ran a hand through his carefully styled hair, disrupting it. Slightly, this is getting more complicated by the minute. Are you uncomfortable with the idea, Louisa? Asked, her yellow eyes studying him. Not uncomfortable, just Henry struggled to find the right words. It's strange to think about forming that kind of connection with someone I can't even see properly. You've been imagining what I look like, haven't you? There was a teasing quality to Lupia's voice that caught him off guard. Henry felt heat rise to his face. Maybe tell me, Louisa settled closer to him, and tell me what you've imagined. The request was intimate in a way that made Henry's mouth go dry. I've tried to picture you based on what you've told me. Tall, luminescent skin, silver white hair, those yellow eyes, and Louisa prompted, and I think you'd be beautiful, Henry admitted, surprised by his own honesty, not just by-in standards. If Louisa could have smiled in her current form, Henry was certain she would have when I'm restored. You'll see for yourself. Is that a promise? The words slipped out before Henry could stop them. It is. Louisa's voice dropped to a near whisper, and I promise you won't be disappointed. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken possibilities. Henry found himself wondering what it would be like to touch Louisa in her true form, to feel her luminescent skin beneath his fingers. We should establish the connection tonight, Louisa said, breaking the charged silence. The ritual requires time to strengthen. How do we start? Henry asked, his voice rougher than usual. Lie down, Louisa instructed. Close your eyes, try to clear your mind. Henry complied, stretching out on the bed and closing his eyes. He felt Louisa's small weight move across the mattress until she was positioned near his head. Now breathe deeply, she continued. Focus on the sound of my voice. Henry inhaled slowly, trying to quiet the thoughts racing through his mind. He felt something soft brush against his temple. Louisa's fur in my true form. This would be done differently, she said softly. There would be touch, shared breath. Show me, Henry murmured, eyes still closed. Help me understand. Imagine my hands on your face. Louisa's voice came through the translator, taking on a hypnotic quality. My forehead touching yours, our breath mingling. Henry found himself easily visualizing what she described in his mind's eye. He saw a tall, graceful woman with luminescent skin and flowing silver white hair leaning over him, her yellow eyes, Louisa's eyes gazing into his. I can feel you, Lua whispered, a note of wonder in her voice. Your mind is opening to mine. A strange warmth began to spread through Henry's body, starting at his temples where Louisa's fur touched him and flowing downward. It wasn't unpleasant, quite the opposite. It felt like sinking into a hot bath after a long, cold day. This is. Henry struggled to find words. I can feel you too. It's like you're inside my head. I am Liowa confirmed, and you're in mine. This is the connection. Henry felt a sudden rush of foreign emotions, longing, hope, fear, and something deeper, more primal, desire. Leah's desire flowing into him through their newfound connection. His eyes flew open in surprise. Lua was still in her transformed state, a small blue creature perched beside his head, but somehow he could sense the woman within, could feel her consciousness brushing against his own. This is incredible, he breathed. It will grow stronger, Laya told him. By tomorrow, I'll be able to see through your eyes, guide you through Vaughn's compound. And after? Henry asked, unable to stop himself. After you're restored. Through their connection, he felt rather than heard her answer, a wave of anticipation and promise that made his heart race. After, Lubia said aloud, her yellow eyes seeming to glow in the dimly lit room. Will explore this connection properly, as equals the implications sent a shiver of anticipation down Henry's spine. Tomorrow, he would infiltrate Vaughn's compound alone, but tonight he wasn't alone at all. He was more connected to Louisa than he'd ever been to another being, human or alien, and if they succeeded, that connection would only deepen. Vaughn's estate loomed at the edge of the city like a gleaming monument to access all sharp angles and reflective surfaces that caught the light of Nexus Prime's setting sun. Henry approached the main gate in a rented luxury hover car, his heart pounding despite his outwardly calm demeanor. Can you hear me? He thought, testing the telepathic connection he and Louisa had established perfectly. Came her response, her voice in his mind clearer than it had been through the translator. I can see everything you see. The security at the gate is exactly as I remembered. Henry presented his invitation to a stern-faced draconian guard who scanned it with practiced efficiency. Lord Thorne, the guard acknowledged with a slight bow. Please proceed to the main entrance for security screening. As Henry drove through the gate, he felt a flutter. Anxiety from Laya through their connection. The scanners are just ahead, she warned. Remember, act natural. You're an entitled collector who expects the best treatment. Henry parked among a row of expensive vehicles and made his way to the ornate entrance. 2 more guards flanked a sophisticated security arch that hummed with energy. Standard procedure, sir, one explained as Henry approached. Please step through slowly. Henry adopted an expression of aristocratic boredom as he passed through the scanner. For a heart-stopping moment, he feared it might somehow detect Lewis's presence in his mind, but the guards merely nodded and directed him inside, wherein he thought triumphantly. Don't celebrate yet, Lewis cautioned. The real challenge begins now. The interior of Bourne's mansion was a testament to obscene wealth. Rare artifacts from across the galaxy displayed in illuminated cases, exotic living plants that seemed to respond to the presence of guests, and automated servants that glided silently across polished floors. Henry was directed to a large atrium where about 20 other guests mingled, sipping colorful beverages from floating trays. He accepted a drink and began to circulate, listening for useful information while projecting the air of someone who belonged there. Lewis's voice came urgently in his mind. The man in the silver suit, that's Drexel von. Henry casually turned to observe a tall, slender alien with iridescent skin and unnaturally elongated fingers. Voron was engaged in animated conversation with several guests, his melodious voice carrying across the room. Suddenly Henry was hit with a wave of fear and revulsion so powerful it nearly made him drop his drink. Through their connection, he was experiencing Lewis's visceral reaction to seeing her tormentor. I'm sorry, she thought quickly. I wasn't prepared for how it would feel to see him again. Along with her emotions came flashes of memory. Lewis in her true form pleading with Vaughn as he activated the transformation device. The excruciating pain as her body contorted and shrank. The humiliation of being displayed in a cage for Vaughn's amusement. Henry gripped his glass tighter, fighting to control the rage building inside him. I'm going to make him pay for what he did to you, he promised silently. Focus on the mission, Lewisa reminded him. Revenge won't help us now. Taking a deep breath, Henry approached a group of collectors near Vaughn, intending to introduce himself. Before he could speak, however, he felt a light touch on his arm. Another human, said a cultured voice. How refreshing. Henry turned to find himself face to face with a distinguished-looking man in his 50s, impeccably dressed in formal Earth attire. Lord Thorne, isn't it? The man continued, extending his hand. I'm Elliot Kane. This is my 4th time attending one of Vaughn's little gatherings. Be careful, Leah warned. Kane is known for his extensive collection of rare specimens. Henry shook the offered hand. A pleasure. You have me at a disadvantage, Mr. Kane. Please call me Elliot. Kane's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. I couldn't help noticing you're new to our little circle. First time at one of Vaughn's showings. Indeed, Henry replied smoothly. I've only recently developed an interest in unique biological specimens. Kane nodded knowingly. Vaughn's collection is unparalleled. His transformation technology in particular is quite remarkable. I've acquired several pieces from him over the years. Henry felt another surge of emotion from Lewisa. Disgust mingled with hope. Kane might be morally reprehensible, but he clearly had information they needed. The transformation technology is precisely what interests me, Henry said carefully. I understand it's quite advanced, light years beyond anything else available, Kane confirmed, lowering his voice. But between us, I have concerns about Vaughn's operation. Rumor has it he's been experimenting with combining DNA from different species, creating hybrids with enhanced capabilities. He's right. Louis's voice came urgently. I saw evidence of these experiments before I escaped. Vaughn was working on something new, something dangerous. That sounds ethically questionable, Henry remarked. Watching Kane's reaction closely, the older man's expression darkened. It's more than questionable. It's reckless. These aren't just collectibles we're talking about, they're sentient beings. He glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. Some of us have concerns about where this is heading. He's opposed to Vors Practices, Henry directed the thought to Louisa O., or he once saw Vorn's technology for himself, she replied. Skeptically, be wary, but this could be useful. Before Henry could probe further, a chime sounded throughout the atrium. Vaughn stepped onto a raised platform at the center of the room, his iridescent skin catching the light dramatically. Distinguished guests, Vaughn announced, his melodious voice silencing all conversation, I welcome you to this exclusive viewing of my latest acquisitions. If you'll kindly follow me to the exhibition hall, we can begin. As the guests moved toward a set of ornate doors, Kane leaned closer to Henry. After the showing, meet me in the East Garden. There's something you should know if you're truly interested in Vaughn's technology. Henry nodded slightly, intrigued despite his suspicions as he followed the crowd Louisa's presence in. His mind grew more intense. The laboratory is 2 levels below the exhibition hall, she informed him. There should be a service elevator at the far end of the corridor. The exhibition hall was a long gallery lined with illuminated display cases. Inside each was a transformed being, creatures of various sizes and colors, all watching the procession of wealthy collectors with intelligent, sorrowful eyes. Henry felt physically ill as he realized each of these specimens was a person trapped in an alien form. Through their connection, he could feel Louisa's pain at seeing others suffering her same fate. That could have been me, she thought. Her mental voice, thick with emotion, displayed like an object for the rest of my life. It won't happen, Henry promised fiercely. We're going to free you in them if we can. As Vaughn began his presentation describing each specimen's original form and special qualities, Henry noticed Kane watching him with an unreadable expression. The older man gave a subtle nod toward a side door, then casually excused himself from the group. Should I follow him? Henry asked Louisa. We need allies, she replied after a moment's hesitation, but be prepared for betrayal, taking advantage of Vorn's focus on a particularly rare specimen. Henry slipped away from the main group, and through the door Kane had indicated he found himself in a small antechamber that opened onto a lush garden filled with exotic plants. Kane was waiting, his back to fountain that masked the sound of their conversation. I'll be direct, Lord of Thorn. I know you're not who you claim to be. Henry tensed, ready to fight or flee. I don't know what you mean, please. Kane held up a hand. I've been tracking Vaughn's operation for years. I work for the Galactic Regulatory Commission, undercover. Obviously, he's lying. Louisa's voice came immediately. The GRC doesn't operate this way. That's interesting, Henry replied carefully, because I have it on good authority that the GRC doesn't run undercover operations in this sector. Kane's expression shifted subtly. Very good, a test which you passed. His voice dropped lower. The truth is I have personal reasons for wanting to see Vaughn's operation dismantled. He has someone that belongs to me. My daughter, Kane said, his composed facade cracking slightly. Vor has my daughter Alice. He's telling the truth. Louisa's voice echoed in Henry's mind, her surprise evident. I remember an Alice, human female transformed into a small reptilian form. I've been infiltrating these gatherings for months. Kane continued, his voice barely above a whisper, trying to find a way into his laboratory. Alice was a xenobiologist studying transformation technology. Born discovered her research, and his voice faltered. I understand, Henry said, feeling a genuine connection with the man. I'm here for similar reasons. Kane's eyes narrowed. You have someone trapped in there too. Before Henry could respond, a chime sounded throughout the garden. Vor's melodious voice followed. Distinguished guests, please return to the exhibition hall for a special demonstration of my newest achievement, a revolutionary advancement in transformation technology. Henry Louisa's mental voice was urgent. We need to see this. It might be the hybrid experimentation. We should go back, Henry told Kane. We can talk more after. Wait. Kane gripped Henry's arm, glancing nervously at a small ornamental shrub nearby. We're being monitored. Bourne has surveillance throughout the estate. Henry followed Kane's gaze and noticed a tiny lens embedded in the plant's foliage. They may have heard everything Louisa warned. We need to move quickly here. Kane pressed something into Henry's palm. A small data chip. Access codes to the laboratory level B2 East Wing. I was planning to use them tonight, but now. He glanced meaningfully at the hidden camera. Thank you. Henry pocketed the chip. We should return separately. Less suspicious. Kane nodded. When the demonstration begins, there will be a Distraction use it as they re-entered the exhibition hall. Henry noticed increased security presence, more guards. Stationed at doorways, their weapons more prominently displayed. Vaughn stood at the center of the room beside a large cylindrical chamber covered by an opaque force field. That's it. Lewis's voice trembled with emotion. That's the transformation device, ladies and gentlemen. Bourne announced as the last guest returned. What you are about to witness represents the pinnacle of biological manipulation technology. For years we have been able to transform beings from one form to another. Today, I present the next evolution: genetic hybridization. A murmur of excitement rippled through to the crowd. Henry felt Lewis's horror through their connection. He's actually done it, she thought. Combined different species. Vaughn gestured dramatically, and the force field around the cylinder became transparent, revealing a humanoid figure. Inside, Henry stifled a gasp. The being appeared mostly human, but with distinctly Aryan features, faintly luminescent skin with a silvery undertone, elongated limbs, and the same striking yellow eyes that Loya possessed. This specimen combines the adaptability and resilience of human DNA with the sensory capabilities and telepathic potential of the Allen species. Vor explained proudly, the military applications alone are worth a fortune. Through their connection, Henry felt Lewis's revulsion and rage building to an almost unbearable intensity. He's using my people, my DNA. The bidding for exclusive rights to this technology will begin at 5 million credits, Vaughn continued, but first a demonstration of its capabilities. As Vaughn turned to activate a control panel, Henry noticed Kane slipping toward a service door at the back of the hall. Almost simultaneously, the lights flickered and alarms began blaring. Throughout the compound, security breach in Sector 7, announced an automated voice. Guards rushed toward the exits as guests looked around in confusion. Now, Henry, Luya urged, this is our chance. In the chaos, Henry slipped away from the main group, following the path Lewis had directed through their connection. A service corridor led to a restricted elevator that would take him to the laboratory level. The access codes gave. You should work on the elevator, Louisa instructed as Henry inserted the data chip into the control panel. The door slid open immediately. B2, Henry commanded as he entered the elevator. Began its descent. Be careful, Louisa warned. The laboratory will be heavily guarded, especially now when the doors opened. Henry was greeted by an empty corridor. The guards had apparently been called to deal with the security breach. Above, moving swiftly but cautiously, he followed Lewis's mental directions to the main laboratory. The lab was a sterile, white-walled chamber filled with advanced equipment. At its center stood another transformation device, identical to the one Vaughn had displayed upstairs. There, Louisa directed his attention to a control terminal. That's where the transformation parameters are programmed. Henry approached the terminal, his fingers hovering over the interface. What now? I need to guide you through the programming sequence, Louisa explained. It's complex, but I memorized it during my captivity. As Henry began inputting commands under Lewis's guidance, a door at the far end of the lab hissed open. He ducked behind a large piece of equipment, watching as two guards escorted a struggling figure into the room. Kane, the human intruder, has been captured, sir. One guard reported into a communicator. We're securing him in the laboratory, as ordered there, using him as bait. Leah realized they know he wasn't alone. Henry weighed his options. He could continue with the plan, programming the device to reverse Lewis's transformation, or he could try to help Kane. We need to help him, Louisa decided before Henry could ask. He risked everything to create this distraction for us. Using their connection, Henry and Louisa formulated a quick plan. He would free Kane while simultaneously programming the device, but time was running short. Vaughn would surely come to check on his prisoner soon. Working quickly, Henry finished inputting the transformation parameters, then set the device to activate on a timer. With that done, he crept toward the guards, holding Kane. The element of surprise worked in his favor. Henry took down the first guard with a powerful blow to the back of the neck, then grappled with the second long enough for Kane to break free and join the fight between them. They subdued both guards. Without raising an alarm, you came back for me, Kane said, breathing heavily. Thank you, we help our own, Henry replied, thinking of Louisa now. We need to get out of here before the main laboratory door slid open and Drexel Vaughn stepped Inflanked by 4 more guards, his iridescent face registered shock then. Anger as he took in the scene. Lord Thorn, he said coldly, or whoever you really are. I suspected Kane was working with someone, but I didn't expect it to be one of my guests. Henry stepped protectively in front of the transformation device. It's over, Vaughn. Your operation is exposed. Vaughn laughed. A musical sound, devoid of humor, exposed to whom the authorities they've been paid to look the other way for years. His elongated fingers gestured to his guards. Kill them both slowly. As the guards raised their weapons, the transformation device behind Henry began to hum its activation sequence, initiated by the timer he'd set. It's working. Lewis's excited voice filled his mind. But I need to be there in the chamber. We need a distraction, Henry muttered to Kane, and I need to get back to my quarters. Kane nodded almost imperceptibly, then suddenly lunged toward a nearby console, slamming his fist down on what appeared to be an emergency control. Instantly, containment fields throughout the laboratory deactivated, and alarms blared even louder than before in the confusion. Henry made his move, diving between 2 guards and rolling to his feet near the exit, the last thing he saw before sprinting from the laboratory was Vaughn's face, contorted with rage as Kane grappled with one of the guards. Hurry, Henry, Louisa urged. The device is ready, but we don't have much time. Henry sprinted through the chaos of Vaughn's estate, alarms blaring in emergency, lights bathing the corridors. Impulsing read the telepathic connection with Louisa, guided him through the maze of hallways, helping him avoid security patrols as he made his way back to the exit. The transformation device is ready, Louisa's voice echoed in his mind, but we don't have much time before Vaughn resets the system. Once outside, Henry commandeered an unattended hover bike, bypassing its security with tricks he'd learned in less reputable corners of the galaxy. The ride back to his quarters was a blur of speed and adrenaline, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. I'm almost there, he thought to Louisa. Be ready to move. I am, she replied, her excitement palpable. Through their connection, Henry, this might actually work. When he burst through the door of his rented room, Louisa was waiting, her small blue form perched alertly on the edge of the bed. Without a word, Henry scooped her up and placed her gently in the inner pocket of his formal jacket. Hold on, he murmured, rushing back to the hover bike. The return journey to Vaughn's estate was even more frantic. Security had been heightened, but the chaos Kane had unleashed was still providing cover. Henry used a service entrance. Lowy directed him to, slipping past distracted guards dealing with multiple system failures. The laboratory is just ahead. Laya guided him, but something's wrong. I sense pain. When they reached the lab, the scene that greeted them was grim. Kane lay sprawled on the floor, blood pooling beneath him from a wound in his side. 2 of Vor's guards lay unconscious nearby, evidence of Kane's continued resistance. Henry rushed to the man's side, carefully turning him over. Kane's eyes fluttered open, his breathing labored. You came back, of course we did, Henry replied, examining the wound. A laser pistol had caught Kane in the side, burning through tissue but missing vital organs. Survivable, but only with immediate medical attention. The device, Kane gasped, gesturing weakly toward the transformation chamber. It's still operational. I protected it. Henry glanced at the chamber, which hummed with energy, ready for use. Then he looked back at Kane's wound, which was bleeding steadily. We have to help him first, Lua decided, her mental voice firm despite her disappointment. My transformation can wait a few more minutes. Henry nodded, quickly tearing strips from his expensive jacket to create a makeshift bandage. As he worked to stabilize Kane, Louisa directed his attention to a medical kit mounted on the laboratory wall. Hang on, Henry told Kane as he retrieved the kit. We'll get you patched up. No time, Kane coughed. Vaughn will be back at any minute. You need to use the chamber now. We're not leaving you to die, Henry insisted, and applying a regenerative gel from the kit to Kane's wound. My daughter. Kane gripped Henry's arm with surprising strength. Find Alice. She's in holding cell 3, level B1. Promise me we'll find her, Laya assured him. Through Henry, but first we need to get you stable and me transformed, then we can rescue her together. With the wound temporarily sealed, Henry helped Kane to a sitting position against the wall. Rest here, we're going to activate the chamber. Then we'll all get out together. Kane nodded weakly, his eyes drifting to the small blue creature now sitting on Henry's shoulder. So that's who you came for. Good luck. Henry approached the transformation chamber, carefully removing Lilia from his shoulder and placing her on the control console. Are you ready? More than ready, she replied, her excitement tinged with nervousness. Once I'm inside, you'll need to activate the sequence I showed you. Henry gently lifted Lucy and placed her inside the cylindrical chamber. Their eyes met one final time in this form, her intelligent yellow gaze holding his blue one with an intensity that transcended her small body. See you soon, he murmured as the chamber sealed. Following Lewis's previously shared instructions, Henry initiated the transformation sequence. The chamber filled with a soft pulsing light that gradually intensified through their telepathic connection. He felt Lewis's consciousness flicker as the process began, a strange sensation of her presence, simultaneously fading and expanding. Then abruptly the connection went silent. Loi, Henry called out, panic rising in his chest. The chamber was now filled with light so bright he couldn't see inside. Luya, can you hear me? No response came through their mental link. For a terrifying moment, Henry feared something had gone wrong, that he'd lost her. The chamber hummed louder, the light pulsing in rhythm with the sound. Henry stood transfixed, unable to look away despite the near blinding intensity. Then gradually the light began to fade and the humming quieted as the chamber's transparent walls cleared. Henry held his breath where the small blue creature had been. A tall, slender figure now stood, a woman with luminescent skin that seemed to glow from within, flowing silver-white hair that cascaded past her shoulders, and those same striking yellow eyes, now set in an exquisitely beautiful face. Lay the chamber door slid open and she stepped out unsteadily, her newly restored limbs trembling slightly. Henry moved forward, instinctively catching her as she stumbled. I've got you, he said softly, his arms encircling her waist. Louisa looked up at him, her yellow eyes wide with wonder. Henry, she whispered, her voice no longer mechanical but rich and melodious. It's really you. For a moment they simply stared at each other, the reality of her transformation sinking in. Henry was struck by how perfectly she matched the image he'd formed in his mind, yet somehow even more breathtaking in reality. You're beautiful, he said finally, the words inadequate for what he felt. A smile spread across Lewis's face, transforming it from merely beautiful to radiant. And you're exactly as I remembered, she replied, reaching up to touch his face with slender fingers. Though I can see you properly now. The moment stretched between them, charged with all the emotions that had built during their unusual connection. Henry found himself leaning closer, drawn to her in a way that transcended their previous bond. Suddenly, the laboratory door slid open with a hiss. Drexel Vaughn stood in the entrance, his iridescent face contorted with rage, flanked by 4 armed guards. How touching, he sneered, his melodious voice dripping with contempt. My property. Reunited with her human rescuer, Henry stepped protectively in front of Louisa, his hand reaching for the laser pistol he'd taken from one of the unconscious guards. She was never your property, he growled, and neither are any of the others you've transformed. Bourne's elongated fingers gestured dismissively. Morality is such a tedious human concept. Everything has a price, including sentient beings. Not anymore, came a new voice from behind Vaughn. The traitor whirled around to find himself facing a squad of uniformed officers. Galactic security forced, their weapons trained on Vaughn, and his guards at their head stood a stern-faced commander who stepped forward, holographic badge glowing. Drexel Vaughn, you're under arrest for illegal sentient trafficking, unauthorized genetic experimentation, and about 30 other violations of galactic code. Vor's guards, seeing themselves outnumbered, slowly lowered their weapons. Vaughn himself seemed to deflate, his iridescent skin dulling with shock. This is impossible, he hissed. I have protection arrangements. Your arrangements have been nullified, the commander replied coldly. We've been building a case against you for months. Tonight we got the final evidence we needed. From behind the Jusha SF officers stepped a familiar figure, Elliot Kine, looking remarkably healthy for a man who'd been bleeding out minutes earlier. Kane, Henry stared in disbelief. But you were wounded, Kane smiled, tapping his aside where the injury had been. Synthetic blood pack, quite convincing, isn't it? I've been undercover with the GSA for over a year, gathering evidence on Vaughn's operation. You used us, Lua said, stepping forward to stand beside Henry. I gave you the opportunity you needed, Kane corrected Gently, and you gave us the distraction required to bring in our team a mutually beneficial arrangement. As Vaughn and his guards were led away, Kane approached Henry and Louisa. There is one thing I didn't lie about, he said. My daughter Alice is here, transformed as I said. Would you help me find her? Together, they descended to the holding cells on level B1. Cell 3 contained a small reptilian creature that leaped excitedly at the sight of Kane. Within the hour, Alice too had been restored to her human form, a young woman with her father's intelligent eyes and determined chin. Over the next 3 days, Henry and Leah worked alongside the GSF to locate and restore all of Vorn's transformed victims, the hybrid beings created through Born's experiments proved more challenging, but with Louisa's knowledge of RN biology and Alice's scientific expertise, solutions were found for each of them. When the last victim had been restored in Vor's compound secured as evidence, Henry found himself standing with Leah on a balcony overlooking the city of Nexus Prime, the night air warm against their skin. What happens now? He asked, watching the play of city lights reflecting off her luminescent skin. Louisa turned to him, her yellow eyes holding his gaze. I've been thinking about that. The GSF has offered me a position as a consultant on interspecies relations. That sounds perfect for you, Henry said, ignoring the pain in his chest at the thought of their paths diverging. It is, Lubia agreed, but I was thinking your cargo hauling business could use some diplomatic expertise when dealing with different species, couldn't it? Henry felt a smile spreading across his face. Are you proposing a partnership, Louisa? I'm proposing many things, she replied, stepping closer until he could feel the warmth radiating from her body. A business partnership, yes, but also her hand found his fingers intertwining. The touch sent a jolt of electricity through Henry that had nothing to do with their former telepathic connection and everything to do with the chemistry between them. I've never been with a human before, Louisa murmured, her free hand coming to rest on his chest, but I've heard your species has some interesting approaches to intimacy. Henry laughed softly, his arm sliding around her waist. And I've never been with an Alarin. We'd be learning together. I like the sound of that, Louisa whispered, her lips now tantalizingly close to his. Learning together. Their first kiss was tentative, exploratory, 2 different species discovering each other. Their second was anything but hesitant. 6 months later, aboard Henry's newly upgraded cargo ship, the Starchaser, Louisa stood in their shared quarters, her hand resting on her slightly rounded abdomen. The doctor confirmed it today, she told Henry as he entered. It's possible, rare but possible. Our DNA is compatible enough. Henry stared at her. Wonder then crossed the room in 3 strides to take her in his arms. A baby, our baby, Louisa nodded, her yellow eyes bright with joy. The first human child in recorded history shall be unique like us. She, Henry repeated, his voice thick with emotion. Just a feeling, Louisa smiled, guiding his hand to her belly. A daughter with your courage and my intuition. As they stood together, contemplating their future, Henry thought back to that day in the marketplace when he had impulsively rescued a small blue creature from being trampled. How could he have known that simple act would lead to this? A love that transcended species, a family that defied biological norms, a partnership that promised adventure across the stars. I never thought rescuing a cute little alien animal would change my life, he murmured against Louisa's silver-white hair. She laughed, the sound like music. And I never thought being a cute little alien animal would lead me to the love of my life. Outside their viewport, the stars streak by as the Stars Chaser carried them toward new horizons in a future neither of them could have imagined alone. The end.